Welcome to Subramani. The biggest problem that I see in asset allocation is the human mind's inability to think long term, or rather the human mind's need to think short term. Take a very simple case, forget investing, even in food. The food which gives you pleasure for maybe 30 seconds is considered to be great, whereas a food which is this food is going to rest on your hips for the next 30 years. So one piece of chocolate, one piece of gulab jamun, one piece of rasgulla doesn't matter, but the fact that it doesn't stop at one piece, and it is not just one piece once in a while, it is either one piece every day or 2-3 pieces at a time, 2-3 times a week, which hurts. Now come and apply the same thing to to your investments. What happens is we largely think in terms of short term because of the media influence that we have. So we are told constantly that for example, now we have been told that Indigo is dead, and airlines are dead. Forget Indigo is dead, hotels are dead, and that's why you should sell off everything and be buying some alcohol manufacturer, because people are going to wash their hands every few minutes or every few hours, and therefore those are the companies in which to invest. Why? Because somebody needs some action, right? We don't have an Arnab equivalent in the financial services media or the news media or business media, let's call it business media. And if we had an equivalent, we would have far more broking incomes, which is good for Zerodha or is ilk, right? So we are pushed to short-termism by media which is working 24/7. When we were investing back in the 1980s, there was no business channel, right? So we didn't have this 24/7 5 channels in some 200 languages bombarding you with what you should be doing. And the most important thing that you should actually be doing is just switching off. Just don't listen, right? Now the other reason why people are short-term thinkers is because the IFAs with them, or their financial advisors, by whatever name called, they're going to be called a new name. I think every 2-3 years we will give them a new name. So by whatever the new name is, they are not in a position to do asset allocation based on a time frame. Now it is very important that you sit with your customer, or the customer sits with the advisor and decides that this money I require in under 3 years, so I will keep it in a bank deposit, and this money I require in 25 years, so I will keep it in equity. The challenge with equity is there is no guarantee that in 25 years it will give a great return, because in 22 years it may have given a great return, and next 3 years it may give a bad return. So you have to understand how equity market works, and you have to allocate your assets into different pockets for different things and keep it in different places. For example, if you keep all your portfolio in website A, that's a mistake. Keep it in 3-4 websites, one for the long term, one for the medium term, and one for the short term, right? You know that keeping money in cash is absolutely no use, because it will erode in value. However, if you require that money within the next 6 months, 8 months, maybe you can make one small bank fixed deposit at 4-5%, which just about might equate or rather counter the inflation bit, and that's all. It's not going to create wealth for you, but it will mean it will counter effect the inflation that is going to happen. So you're better off in a short-term deposit rather than in a savings bank account. However, if you require money after 7 years, maybe you can get into some ultra short bond funds, short-term bond funds, and 10% of that money can be in equities, which might act as a kicker. But if it is 10 years and above, it doesn't really matter whether it is 25 years or 250 years. You are not going to think about it now. That money should be in equity. And very clearly, as the time goes nearer, we are now in say 2020. Suppose you need money in 2032, which means you got 12 years to go. After 5-6 years, you should review how that is doing, what it has to be done, how far away the goal is, has the goal changed, has the goal increased in size, right? You have to actually spend time doing all this. Who will do it for you? You have to do it yourself. And if you can't do it or won't do it, you have to have a good advisor who will do all this, right? So stop to make yourself stop thinking short term. It can happen only when you keep it in separate places and say, I'll apply my mind to it on separate days. So when you are reviewing your equity, don't worry about what is happening today in the market. It doesn't matter whether Indigo shares are up or Indigo shares are down. The investments that you have made have been in a company which is run by a good fund manager who thinks that 2-3% of his money should be in Indigo. That's fine. Let him do that. Don't then go and ask him, why are you doing that? Don't waste a fund manager's time by talking for 97% of the time on something which is 2-3% of his portfolio. Right? People do that quite normally. So when you do your asset allocation properly and you time frame your asset allocation. This is my daughter's education and she's now 2 years old. So fine, next 23 years I don't have to look at it. That money has got to be in equity and it has to be kept so far away that you will not be able to break it for whatever reasons, at least not for the next 15-16 years, right? So why should you be looking at that portfolio regularly? So do your asset allocation based on time. Don't create a asset liability mismatch. Create adequate insurance for all your contingency that you can think of. None of us knew that COVID would keep you at home for 6 months, right? You'll never be able to provide anything for this, except that you need to have an emergency fund. So COVID or COVID's grandfather, something will hit you once in maybe 100 years or once in 50 years. You need to be prepared for that broadly. You cannot be very specifically prepared for it. You have to have adequate medical insurance so that in case something like this comes up. You have to have a very good solid qualification so that in case you lose your job for whatever reasons, you are capable of finding a job elsewhere. These are all ring fencing your compounding, and that can happen provided your asset allocation is done properly. Your asset allocation is put into a box and said, this is for your daughter's education. Don't touch it, right? So, but what happens generally is people say, okay, that's okay, I'm quite disciplined, so I will not worry. But somewhere they go to a party, something happens and suddenly they are worried that their market has fallen by 3%, and if the market falls like this every day for 30 days, 90% of their portfolio will be wiped out. This is ridiculous, right? So this doesn't happen. You have to start thinking in terms of timing your asset allocation portfolio. So say, okay, this is 5 years, so much in debt. This is 25 years, so 0 in debt, right? That kind of breaking up with something which you should do. Keep it in different locations so that when you're concentrating on your short term, don't think about your long term. Because what is going to happen in the short term in terms of inflation or something like that, it's not going to have such a great impact. You don't have to worry what Narendra Modi is going to do with the banking reforms or things like that. This is your short-term thing. In your long term, you have to think, yes, I need to be in BFSI. Should I be in more of banking or should I be in allied services? Start thinking like that. Start thinking, putting your assets across time and then thinking like that. That will help you overcome this short-termism. I'm not saying don't trade. Asset activity has nothing to do with time activity. So do separate the two. You say, I have a 20 lakh budget in which I will trade, or a 5 lakh budget in which I will trade. And other than that, this money is for my retirement. This is for my buying a bigger house after 15 years. This is for daughter's education. This is for son's education, right? Keep them separate. Don't think of all of this at the same time. Very many of us may not have that skill. And once you can do that, at least you will not subject your long-term portfolio to short-termism. Hold on to your long-term portfolio. Sell a company if it does badly. But otherwise, just stick on to it. Thank you.